You don't own gold. Your parents don't own gold. But the money in your parents' bank account, its real name is a promise. The bank promises you can withdraw any time. The government promises it's worth something. But promises can be broken. In 1971, the most important promise in the world was torn up on live television by a single country. From that moment on, gold stopped being a relic and became humanity's last non-default option. But to understand this, we have to go back more than 3,000 years to a 19-year-old boy who died too young. In 1350 BC, the Egyptian pharaoh Tutankhamun died. His tomb was packed with gold, golden chariots, golden thrones, a golden coffin. That alone used 110 kilograms of pure gold. When it was opened more than 3,000 years later, it still gleamed. But here's the fascinating part. While Tutankhamun was alive, Egyptians didn't use gold for everyday transactions. They used grain and copper. Gold wasn't for business. It served one purpose: to accompany the pharaoh into the grave. Why would a metal that wasn't used for buying things be considered more precious than life itself by ancient people? Fast forward 2,000 years. Arab merchants crossed the Sahara, trading one horse for 1 ounce of gold. Jump to today, central banks around the world are hoarding gold at an unprecedented pace, buying nearly double their historical average annually. Over 4,000 years, empires have risen and fallen, religions have changed, technology has been revolutionized. Everything has changed, except humanity's obsession with gold. Today, we'll peel back the layers. What makes gold so special? To answer this, we have to start at the very bottom. The periodic table. 1. Why gold and only gold? Imagine you're an ancient tribal chief. You need to choose one thing to represent wealth. What do you pick? Stone? It's everywhere worthless. Wood? It rots. Iron? It rusts. Copper and silver? They tarnish and turn black. What about diamonds? Hard and rare, sure, but you can't split one in half to make change. Gold's chemical symbol is Au, from the Latin aurum, meaning glorious dawn. Its position on the periodic table makes it almost the only answer. Rare, but not too rare. All the gold ever mined in human history totals about 200,000 tons. Just enough to fill 3.5 Olympic swimming pools. Too little and it couldn't circulate. Too much and it would be worthless. Chemically stable. It doesn't oxidize, corrode, or tarnish. Bury it for 3,000 years and it comes out gleaming. The bronze from the same period? Green with rust. Incredibly malleable. 1 ounce of gold can be drawn into 50 kilometers of wire, or hammered into 9 square meters of foil thin enough to let light pass through. Ancient people didn't understand chemistry, but over thousands of years of trial and error, every civilization reached the same conclusion. Only gold simultaneously satisfies rarity, permanence, divisibility, portability, and recognizability. This isn't a coincidence. It's physics making the choice for humanity. 2. Ancient obsession. Gold as the skin of power. But if you think ancient people valued gold just because it was useful, you're underestimating the depth of this story. In all early civilizations, gold was never just about money. In ancient Egypt, gold was called the skin of the gods. The pharaoh was considered the living embodiment of the sun god, so his body had to be wrapped in gold. Wearing gold ornaments in life, lying in a gold coffin in death. This wasn't showing off. This was religious ritual. Gold symbolized eternal life, a mortal's passport to the divine realm. In the same era, China's Shangxingdui civilization unearthed a 4-meter gold staff, pure gold wrapped around a wooden core. Archaeologists found that the patterns on this staff, fish, birds, bows, and arrows, directly correspond to the name of the ancient Shu king. To possess the gold staff was to possess divinely sanctioned rule. In South America's Inca Empire, gold was called the tears of the sun. The Inca king's palace had a golden garden. Every plant, every animal, even the soil was made of gold. When Spanish conquistador Pizarro first saw it, he was speechless with shock. Then he did one thing: melted it all down into bars. Without the internet, from Egypt to India to China to South America, civilizations independently arrived at the same conclusion. This isn't cultural transmission. It's a consensus of human nature. 3. The Lydian Revolution. When gold first became money. Alright, we've covered the religious dimension. Now let's talk about gold as currency. Around 600 BC, in what is now Turkey, there was a kingdom called Lydia. Its king did something that changed the world. He mixed gold and silver to cast small discs of uniform weight and purity. The first gold coins in human history. Before coins, transactions used weighed silver blocks. Every single trade required verifying purity and measuring weight. Incredibly tedious. With the king's stamp on the coin, it became the state's guarantee of weight and purity. For the first time, state credit was tied to precious metal. How successful was this invention? Lydian coins quickly became the international currency of the Mediterranean world. The Greeks adopted it. The Persians adopted it. Later, Alexander the Great, after conquering Persia, put his own portrait on gold coins and circulated them with his armies all the way to India. From that moment, gold was no longer just the skin of the gods. It became the passport to power. Whoever controlled gold issuance controlled the arteries of trade. 4. The gold standard. Gold's canonization. Paper money first appeared in China's Song dynasty, called jiaozi, but it was the British who truly spread the paper currency system worldwide. In 1816, Britain formally passed the Gold Coinage Act, establishing the gold standard. What did that mean? Simply put, every pound note in your hand could be exchanged at the Bank of England for an equivalent amount of gold. Paper money was just a receipt for gold. Here's an example to make it crystal clear. Imagine an ancient goldsmith's shop. You deposit 100 grams of gold, and the goldsmith gives you a slip of paper saying, "This receipt is redeemable for 100 grams of gold." That slip can be spent in the market, because whoever holds it can go to the goldsmith and get real gold anytime. The paper money under the gold standard was essentially just a goldsmith's receipt issued by the state, except the goldsmith was now the central bank, and the receipt was printed with the king's face. As long as you wanted, you could go to the bank and convert that paper into real gold. Whether the paper money held its value depended entirely on whether the bank's vault had enough gold to back it up. That's the simplest logic of the gold standard. This system had one huge advantage. Governments couldn't just print money arbitrarily. Every note printed had to be backed by gold reserves. If you printed too much, people would rush to exchange their paper for gold, and the state's credit would collapse instantly. The gold standard was effectively a pair of golden handcuffs on governments. You want inflation? Sorry. Gold says no. Over the next century, the gold standard spread across the globe. Germany, France, the United States, Japan all followed suit. Gold became humanity's first globally unified monetary anchor. But the gold standard had a fatal weakness. And in 1914, that weakness was triggered. 5. The Betrayal. When gold and credit parted ways. In 1914, World War I broke out. Every nation needed to fund the war, but there wasn't enough gold. What did they do? Temporarily abandon the gold standard and print money like crazy. After the war, countries tried to restore the gold standard, but gold production couldn't keep pace with economic growth. The world fell into a gold famine, deflation, which is even more damaging than inflation. This structural contradiction got a brilliant but dangerous solution in 1944. 44 nations gathered at Bretton Woods, New Hampshire, and designed a new system. The dollar was pegged to gold at $35 per ounce. All other currencies were pegged to the dollar. In short, the dollar became gold's stand-in. You didn't need to hold gold, you could hold dollars, because the US promised to redeem them for gold anytime. This system made the dollar the new global reserve currency, replacing the pound. Gold remained the ultimate anchor, But ordinary people would never see it again. It was locked away in Fort Knox, behind layers of security. The problem for the global economy to have enough dollars to circulate. The US had to keep printing them. But the more it printed, the less those dollars were worth. And the more dubious the gold redemption promise became. In 1971, France made the first move, sending warships loaded with dollars to New York to demand gold. Other central banks followed. The Nixon administration did the math. U.S. gold reserves could only cover 1/4 of the dollars held by foreign central banks. On the 15th of August, 1971, Nixon announced on television, "The gold window is closed. The dollar will no longer be redeemable for gold." That day became known as the Nixon shock. From that day forward, humanity officially entered the era of pure fiat currency. Your dollar bill has no physical backing whatsoever, resting entirely on one thing: trust in the U.S. government. 6. The turning point. Gold's revenge. After 1971, gold lost its monetary anchor status and became just another commodity. For the next 50 years, the pricing logic was simple. When interest rates rise, gold prices fall. When rates fall, gold prices rise. That model worked for half a century, but in recent years, everything changed. In a major geopolitical rupture not long ago, an unprecedented move occurred. A sovereign nation's hundreds of billions of dollars in overseas assets were frozen and potentially confiscated in a matter of days. This sent shockwaves through every central bank governor on the planet. Your dollar assets are, in essence, an IOU. If one day you fall out with the issuer, they can simply refuse to pay. From that moment on, central bank behavior underwent a fundamental reversal. In recent years, global central banks' net gold purchases have remained at exceptionally high levels for consecutive years, nearly double the historical average of the 2010s. Looking at the geographic distribution of gold-buying central banks, emerging markets and developing economies are the main drivers, which directly correlates with their pressure to diversify reserve assets under the dollar credit system. 7. The data. How gold is rewriting the global financial map. Let's look at some hard numbers. Data point 1. Gold has become the world's largest official reserve asset. According to a European Central Bank report published in June 2026, as of the end of 2025, gold's share of global official reserve assets rose to 27%, surpassing U.S. Treasuries 22% and the euro 15%, to become the largest official reserve asset globally. This marks the first time gold has overtaken U.S. Treasuries since 1996. Global central bank gold reserves now stand at 36,000 tons, approaching the levels seen at the peak of the Bretton Woods system. However, the ECB also noted that this shift was largely driven by valuation effects from soaring gold prices. In 2024 and 2025, gold prices rose approximately 30% and 65% respectively, pushing up the value of gold holdings. In other words, gold's overtaking of treasuries came from both active central bank buying and price appreciation. Data point 2. The structural support from central bank buying. From 2022 to 2024, global central banks recorded net gold purchases exceeding 1,000 tons annually for 3 consecutive years. 1,082 tons in 2022, 1,037 tons in 2023, and approximately 1,180 tons in 2024. In 2025, despite elevated gold prices, purchases still reached 863 tons, significantly above the annual average from 2010 to 2021. Entering 2026, central banks added 244 tons in the first quarter alone. Data point 3. Central bank expectations for the future. The World Gold Council's 2026 Central Bank Gold Reserve Survey, published in June 2026, shows that 89% of respondent central banks expect global official gold reserves to continue increasing over the next year. and 45% plan to increase their own gold holdings within the next 12 months. A record high proportion. 84% of respondents believe gold's share of global reserves will rise over the next 5 years, while 74% expect the dollar's share to decline. All three data points point to one conclusion. The underlying logic of global capital is shifting from a unipolar dollar credit system toward a multipolar reserve system, and gold is the anchor at the center of this transformation. 8. Cutting through the noise. Building credibility. After all this, you probably have two questions in mind. Should I buy gold now? And will prices go up or down? If you're expecting me to give you a definitive answer, I'll be honest with you. I can't. And you shouldn't trust anyone who claims they can. Why? Because short-term gold prices depend on a bunch of things I can't predict. Central bank rate decisions, geopolitical flare-ups, sentiment on social media, quantitative trading algorithms rebalancing positions. These belong to the trader's world, not the investor's world. What I can do is cut through the short-term noise and show you the structural truth. And what is that truth? At this moment in time, gold's role is undergoing a fundamental transformation. We used to talk about gold as a safe haven or an inflation hedge, but if that's all you see, you're underestimating it. Today, gold's core function is de-risking, removing sovereign credit risk, geopolitical risk, and the risk of the global payment system being weaponized. A Western investor and an Eastern investor may have completely different understandings of gold. One still pricing it through an interest rate model, the other treating it as a strategic asset. I won't tell you to bet on price movements, but I will say this with confidence. In an era of repeated dollar credit erosion, intense geopolitical friction, and a collective pivot by the world's central banks, any serious asset allocator should re-examine gold's role. It is no longer an optional sidekick, but a necessary cornerstone. Finally, let's return to Tutankhamun. He lay in his golden coffin, wearing his golden mask. The Egyptians believed gold would carry him to eternity. 3,000 years later, gold did exactly that. It made a 19-year-old boy pharaoh remembered by the entire world. Ancient people knew nothing about interest rates, exchange rates, or geopolitical games, but they grasped by instinct the most essential thing about gold: eternity and trust. Modern people wrap it in complex models: futures, ETFs, derivatives. But strip away all the packaging, and gold's appeal today is no different from what it was 3,000 years ago. In an uncertain world, people need a store of value that requires no one's promise, no one's endorsement. Something that's always there, waiting. Over thousands of years, humanity has invented countless forms of money. Cowrie shells, copper coins, silver ingots, paper bills, cryptocurrencies. Only one thing, 3,000 years later, still shines with the same composition and the same light, rediscovered by every generation. And that thing is gold itself. I'm Gino, helping you see the underlying logic beneath the assets. See you next time.